Good afternoon, everybody. We are now back live in planning meeting. Thank you very much. Just a quick announcement that Councillor Caberry-Brown has given her apologies for the meeting today. So that means item 4 that we didn't take in order will have to be postponed until the next planning meeting of the 24th of June, as we are not quorate for that vote. So that will go on. So that is item 4, application S210021. That will be put on the next planning committee. Okay, thank you very much. So we go now to item 9, which is S202018. And we have Phil doing the report presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good afternoon, members. This next application is S202018. It's an outline application for a single-storey dwelling on land off Churchill Avenue in Bourne. The key issues, details in the main report, key issues to consider are the principle of development, the impact of the development on the character of the area, impact on neighbouring residential amenity and highways impacts. So the application site itself is located towards the south of Bourne at the back of an existing cul-de-sac in a residential area. You can see on the screen there, it's already very much residential properties around that cul-de-sac, and the land is currently garden land adjacent to that property to the north. You'll see on one of the slides later on land that's further to the east, just showing where my cursor is there on the screen. There is an extant planning permission for 2 further dwellings on that land as well, and those properties are accessed by this access point just to the south here. So this shows the application site itself. You can see it's land between 2 properties around that cul-de-sac. I'll come back to this slide. This is a similar sort of site that was allowed on appeal. I'll come back to that when I've talked a bit more about the site for this application. So this is the site itself. You can see the access would go over this existing drop curb and would be between these 2 2-storey properties. This is around the other side of the cul-de-sac, and you can see there are, whilst this side of the cul-de-sac is 2-storey properties, you can see there are single-storey properties, including those that are end gable on to the road on the other side of Churchill Avenue. These are some photos of the site itself. You can see it's that existing residential garden to the host property. So this is the layout as proposed, and this also shows the approved dwellings on land to the east. I should sort of say at this point that this is an amended proposal under a separate application number. The application was originally submitted for 2 dwellings on this site, and that was considered to be overdevelopment of the site, which would have led to a cramped layout and very little amenity space for those properties. The actual application itself has been amended during the lifetime of this application, and whilst it's an outline application with all matters reserved, the description of development has been changed to specifically reference it being a single story dwelling. So originally when submitted, it was just referred to as a dwelling, and there were indicative plans showing that the property would occupy a larger footprint and be set over 2 stories, or a sort of a dormer style property, sometimes referred to 1.5 stories. So yeah, if we just look at the site sort of in context there, you can see it's a tight site. You know, it's garden land as existing. There are some considerations to point out. There was a previous planning permission on this site for again outlined for a single story dwelling, albeit that was back in the early 1980s, I think. At that time, both adjacent properties also had permission, although the host property has since had a side extension. If I just go back, I say that they are difficult, these sites, and you know, clearly they're sort of tight infill sites. And this was a scheme from 2018. So although under the old plan, again, you had 2-story properties either side, and the applicant was seeking to gain permission for a single story dwelling on some garden land, that this was refused under delegated powers, but then subsequently appealed, and the applicant was successful on appeal. So just running through the evaluation, so the details in the main report. The development of the site is considered to be acceptable in principle. So that's on the basis of it being within an existing residential area in Bourne, having adjoining residential uses, and being I guess a gap in a frontage which meets the principal criteria of policy SP3. This is an outline application with all matters reserved. So whilst there is an indicative plan submitted, the applicant would have to come back with matters relating to scale. Effectively, that's the footprint of the building as well as the height of the building. Any landscaping details would have to come back. The appearance, so that's all about the materials and the elevational treatments. The access and parking arrangements itself, and the layout, so effectively where the dwellings positioned within the site. So under this application, we really are just considering, in principle, can a single story dwelling be achieved at that site? I suppose that's quite an important point, is the change in description. So whilst scale and layout are reserved matters, the description of development itself being a single story dwelling does provide a limit in that respect. And it would mean that the scale would have to come back and conform to that description of development. I've already talked about the previous permission on the site. That's not extant, so it's expired and was granted under a different policy context. So whilst that is a material consideration, I would suggest limited weight should be afforded to that permission, certainly not the same weight we would afford were it extant and capable of implementation. So in summary, it's a small site, considered to be acceptable in principle, and subject to further details, it is considered that a modest single story dwelling could be accommodated on the site. So therefore, the officer recommendation is that the scheme should be approved, subject to the conditions set out in the main report. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Phil, for that report. As there's no public speakers, we'll go into debate and questions. Thank you, Councillor Selby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's one key question with this application, isn't it, Madam Chairman, as we spoke about it on the site visit. Could you tell us, please, Phil, what is the width of the access to it, please, because there is a double garage there, isn't there? And you know, bearing in mind that a car coming out of the garage, and it's probably not a material interest that down the line, several years in the future, that the ownership changes. However, you know, that is something that we did think about. So if you just tell us what and I'm assuming there's a little tree, there's a small tree, isn't there, on the entrance? I'm assuming that would come down as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't have the sort of specified measurement of the width of that access. I did have a sort of further look at it after the site visit, and some of the questions I think that were raised to the officer on the site. Clearly, there's a number of options there in terms of providing access to both the host dwelling and that additional dwelling as proposed. I think one of the photos showed they currently use some of the frontage as parking. That's the host property. But it certainly looks like in order to access that proposed site, you would need to cross over part of the access to the existing host dwelling, which is in front of that double garage. That isn't necessarily an issue, and it's not uncommon that you would have a shared access arrangement. The detail of where those parking spaces would be and how that access would work would have to come back and be assessed under reserved matters. And I guess the detail of who has access rights over whose driveway, that sort of strays into a civil matter, and that would have to be agreed separately between the host property and the proposed land. So although I can't give you a specified, actual width of that access, the Highway Authority have sort of effectively considered in principle, suitable access arrangements for both properties could be achieved, but they would need to be further considered under reserve matters.
Thank you. Do I have any other people wishing to speak in debate? Thank you. Harish Bisnasingh.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Phil, is this a backland development, or to me it feels very much like an infilling, and in a garden? It's a loss of a garden, and also there are 6 trees in that garden that I feel would be ashamed, for it to be lost or to be destroyed. And I think it's going to change the visual aspects of the area, the spatial amenities of the area. It's too much cramming of the properties in very close proximity.
I wouldn't describe it as backland development. I think the indicative layout showed that it is possible to site a small dwelling, sort of, albeit on a sort of oblique line between the 2 existing properties. But I think I would consider it to be an infill development to meet the broad principles under that policy. Clearly there is some loss of existing garden land, and that's something members need to consider, whether it leaves an adequate area of garden land for both the proposed dwelling and the host dwelling. The case officer's assessment is that it is reasonable. Again, yes, there would be some loss of some domestic trees in that garden, but they're not protected in any way at the moment, and effectively they could be cut down at any point and it wouldn't constitute development. So it's difficult in that respect to use that as a reason for refusal. And clearly any landscaping is a reserved matter, and so any loss of existing vegetation would be sought to be brought back through the details of that landscaping condition.
Is it? Do we have to demonstrate is there a need for that sort of accommodation? Because I know there is a tremendous demand for affordable homes, affordable housing, but this is just a bungalow. I think probably, I don't know, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom bungalow in that size. So I feel very agreed that we lose a nice green space, a garden, which really is be lost forever.
A couple of points. So it's not an affordable property. So it's the application submitted as a market dwelling. In terms of need, the housing need broadly is set out in the local plan, and we have a target as a council of providing approximately 650 homes per year. Part of that 600, a large part of that 650 homes is made up of allocated sites, but there is a windfall allowance, which I think it's around about 30 properties per year, and that's what the infill policies and the edge of settlement policies seek to do, is they seek to make up that additional requirement. So I think inherently there is an identified need in the locality for housing per se, and again, except it does result in a loss of some garden land, but what we're required to do is make an assessment and say, does it leave an adequate garden for the proposed dwelling, and does it leave an adequate garden for the existing host property? Thank
you. Councillor Stevens?
I don't know how similar Bourne is to Deeping, but when we did we conducted a survey in preparing our neighbourhood plan. When we did that, there was a great demand exhibited for bungalows, actually. So bungalows, while affordable housing is obviously needed, but also older people do need bungalows to move into, and they always seem to go like hotcakes, and there never seem to be enough of them. And certainly in the new developments that are being built in Deeping at the moment, there aren't an awful lot of bungalows included in those. So I think bungalows are a good thing, actually. And as much as I can see the problem with the access here, which is obviously the key point, really, I think, is the access, I don't really think we could refuse this application. So I will propose that we accept it, pass it, give it permission.
Thank you. My concern is with the access and egress of the property, but that would come under a civil matter. So like you say, we couldn't do much about that. Councillor Baxter?
Thank you. I think I missed a bit. Did you mention an application that had gone to appeal? Which one was that? Has it got a number on it? Yeah. S181106. S181106. Thank you. I'll look that up in a minute. But the highways say that it needs to be 4.1 metres. Are you telling us that we don't know if it's 4.1 metres or not?
I suppose, if you look at the site at the moment where the red line goes, there's that's effectively an existing access. So that part of the red line there is a drop curb that facilitates access to that garage. And I certainly think that sort of distance there is 4.1 metres, or certainly that could be achieved. But it's likely to be a shared arrangement because, like I say, clearly to access this property to where that double garage is, and to either use that garage or park in front of it, you go over this red line. So I think this access would be likely to be a shared access, but it needs to be considered in the context of, a modest single-storey dwelling may have one car, perhaps a maximum of 2 cars, and the sort of the vehicle movements in and out of this site, I think, are going to be very minimal. Going back to that, this is the site, Ancaster Road in Bourne, so it's quite close to this site, and this is a fairly sort of regimented layout. It doesn't necessarily mean that, because this got granted on appeal, that we should give permission to all of these type of sites. I just, having been involved with this one, I felt it was, had a lot of similarities, really, in terms of the way, the shape of the site and fundamentally what was being proposed there. And that this one has been built out now. And, really it looks like a sort of a large outbuilding, sat within the back of that garden, with some parking to the front. But again, that was under the old plan. We've got new policies now, but it's probably the best relevant comparison that I could find.
Thank you, Chair. The proposed, and I'm looking at the online documents. Have you got the proposed plan superseded or the superseded site plan, whichever one I'm supposed to be looking at? Both of them say July 2020.
Previous plan.
We're looking at 2018, aren't we? S20 2018. So the drawings on the planning website, the drawings which are marked superseded site plan and proposed plan that's superseded, are they not relevant?
If they say superseded, they've been superseded, so they're effectively the earlier versions of the plan. So,
Ashley, did you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. So can you tell me which of the 5 revised drawings on the website we're looking at? Are we looking at revised site plan 1 or revised site plan 2, or superseded drawing site plan, or superseded outline of dwelling, or proposed drawing superseded?
I think with the other previous plans, there were for 2 dwellings on that location. And this is for a single dwelling. Previous applications on this site were for 2 dwellings in that same location. And the last one was withdrawn. And it was for erection of 2 3-bedroom dwellings. Now we're down to 1 dwelling, single story.
All these drawings are related to 2018.
yeah, so just to clarify, so because it's not an outline planning permission with all matters reserved, the only recommended plan to be approved is the effectively the existing location plan. So all you would be doing is defining the outline of the site, if you like. So if you go on the planning portal, that's plan 19415301. The 2 revised site plans that you're referring to, revised site plan 1 and revised site plan 2, revised site plan 2 being the one that shows the indicative position of the dwelling, they are just, for indicative purposes, and they don't form part of the approved plans.
One of the drawings on the website, which is what's caused my confusion, has got a double garage. Within the outline, we're not saying yes, they will, or no, they can't have a double garage. That's up to them to bring back the... Yeah, okay. Because I would have a trouble with the double garage. I think I struggle to find out how they will get a second vehicle into the site or even reverse the first vehicle out the site. I didn't go on the site visit, I'm sorry, but is there room to go in, turn round and come back out again?
I mean, it looks like it's pretty tight in that respect. I mean, if you look at the screen at the moment, and compare it to the parking arrangement they went for on the scheme that got granted on appeal, it looks like you would probably reverse your car into that and have it in if you were going for 2 parking spaces, they might be sort of like a tandem arrangement, one in line with the other in front of the house. Whilst it's sort of desirable to be able to turn your car within the site, it isn't always a necessity to, as part of a planning application, that the highway authority will assess that in terms of, what are they reversing out onto, what are the existing traffic movements in that area. And given it's the end of a cul-de-sac, I think even if you had to sort of reverse out of that site, it wouldn't be considered a sort of an unacceptable highway safety impact. But that all those arrangements, as I say, they would be subject to further assessment at the reserved matter stage.
Thank you. Councillor Bishnasing.
Phil, can you keep that plan on, please? Yes, the north red thick lines, which is close to the house that's already there. Is that going to be a solid wall, brick wall, or is it going to be a fencing? And obviously the front part, the dog side, hind legs part of it is not going to be there. There's no wall, so that will be all open space there. Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Is it going to be solid, or is it going to be separated? Whose boundary is going to be?
So say, all this application does is establish principle of you could put, if you consider that a single story dwelling could be located on the site under landscaping. One of the requirements under that is boundary treatments. And so within that reserved matter submission, they would have to come back and show exactly how those boundaries look in relation to the adjacent properties.
Councillor Jacky Smith.
Thank you. Yes, I did go on. I did go on the visit yesterday and had a good look round. I thought there was plenty of room for vehicles to get into the site and also for another dwelling in the garden area at the back. I think we've got to accept that these days people want various facilities, and we're going to get more and more of people trying to squash houses into areas because land is getting expensive. We don't know the background to the people. It might be that there's an old granny waiting to move into a part of the house where she can have a little bit of privacy. We don't know all of that, but these are the sort of things that are going to come up. And I think, we can go and ask the question, but is it anything really to do with us? How
no, it isn't. That's not a planning.
No, and therefore, all we can do is just look at it and say, well, looking from this point, yes, they've asked for a space to park a car and an entrance to get a car or something in. It will do it, and that's all we can really look at. So I think, having had a good look at it, I'm sure that they can get what they want in there, and therefore we've not really got a ground to say no.
Thank you. Can you just turn your mic off? I'm just going to play slight devil's advocate, because if it was an infill development on SP3C, I would have said it does cause harm or an unacceptable impact upon the occupier's amenity of adjacent properties. That's my view. Councillor Selby.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Don't think we have a seconder yet for the proposal, and Judy's proposed it. I think the site itself could fit a property on it. I think that's, and we had a good look at it, and it all depends on what they want to put on it, and that'll obviously come back at a later date. And I think looking at the plan, I think if there was a property from the original developers, if they'd put a property on there, I don't think we'd have blinked an eye at it. The access issue was something of concern for myself, especially with the double garage being there. However, as it's been stated, that'll be a civil issue in the future between the neighbours. No doubt they'll fall out over it, like cats and dogs. But well, anyway, that's up to them. But I do think something can be squeezed on there. I'll second the proposal, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Have we all finished in debate? So we will go with the proposal by Councillor Judy Stevens for the application is approved conditionally, and it was seconded by Councillor Ian Selby. So we will go, all those in favour, please raise your hand. That's 4 in favour. Those against? 2 and 1 abstention. So that has been carried, if my maths is correct. Thank you very much. Thank you, Phil. And we will go on to our last application, which is agenda item 10, S20 1915. And Chris will be doing the presentation report. Thank you very much, and we'll wait for it to load.
Thank you, Chairman. This application is for the change of use from agricultural to equestrian land, construction of a new vehicle access, stable block, manage, alterations to drainage, and extension of domestic garden. The key issues raised as part of this application include the principle of development, the impact on residential amenity, flooding and drainage, and highway impact. This is an aerial view of the site, with the site located to the south of Stainfield on current agricultural land to the rear of existing properties. This is the red line plan of the application site. Just to highlight as well, this includes the blue line plan, which shows the existing host dwelling and the existing garden to the host dwelling. And this photo shows a view into the site. This is taken from Hanthorpe Road, from the last dwelling in the row of dwellings, immediately on the right-hand side there as you look into the site. And you can see sheep grazing on the land in the middle of the screen. This is the proposed site plan. So this shows an overview of the proposal with the site split between grazing land, a wildlife meadow, extended garden for the host dwelling, stable block, manage and holding paddock. This is the same plan, just a zoomed in version now of the same plan that was shown to you on the previous slide. And this shows, we've zoomed in on the plan to show you the scope of the extended residential curtilage to the host dwelling and also the location of the stable block proposed as well. These are the stable block plans. So there'd be feather edge timber boarding in construction just below 3.5 metres to the ridge and house 3 stables together with a storeroom and hay barn. And then in terms of the evaluation of the application, it's considered acceptable in principle with the proposal supported by local plan policy SP5 for equestrian use in the countryside location. There's not considered to be any harm to residential amenity with sufficient distances to neighbouring dwellings from the stables and also taking into account the existing agricultural use of the land. No objections have been received from any consultees, including the Internal Drainage Board, Lead Local Flood Authority and County Council Highways. There's a condition proposed as part of the report removing permitted development rights for the extended garden. By that, what we mean is that they wouldn't be able to erect an outbuilding, so a shed, greenhouse, other outbuilding, etc., on the extended garden land without prior permission from the local planning authority. What's not included on the report as part of verbal update, I'd also like to propose adding 2 further conditions as well to the application. One which restricts the site to personal use only for equestrian use with no commercial equestrian use permitted, and also a further condition for no floodlighting to be installed without prior permission from the local planning authority. Subject to those 2 additional conditions mentioned, the application is recommended for approval subject to those conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Chris. There are no public speakers on this, so we'll go into question debate. Do I have any questions from anybody? Councillor Selby.
Well, if nobody else wishes to speak, I will then, Madam Chairman. I took the opportunity yesterday to go and have a look at this site on my way to the other site visits. Coming on the Stainfield Road, couldn't help but notice on your right-hand side, there's loads of fields there, loads of horses in there. You know, it's such a great environment for the horses, the equine world. Yes, it's lovely to see all those. This particular application, well, I said the first application today had a feel good factor. Well, this one does for me, Madam Chairman. I grew up on horses. I was born on a horse, I believe. Best animal on the planet by a long, long way. And anything to further the development of horses, especially in our area, I'm happy to propose this, Madam Chairman. They can build gold-plated stables, if they like, as far as I'm concerned, Madam Chairman. And they could even put solar panels on the roof for them, if they like, for the stable lights. Madam Chairman, I'm delighted to propose this, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Vishna Singh.
Very happy to second it, actually, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else wishing to speak? This could be a record. We will go. Oh, yes. So with your proposal to accept, are you accepting the additional 2 proposals of personal use and no floodlighting? Yes, thank you. And you are happy with that? Thank you. So we'll go to the vote then. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Hang on a minute, we're still being recorded, so be careful. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank the substitutes for standing in, for the councillors on the committee and for all their officers, for all their hard work. Thank you very much, and I close the meeting.